Flow podcast. I'm Shaun the Hustle.
And I'm Les the Flow.
Go.
All right, today, guys, we have a guest with us. His name is Jordan Bates. Jordan is someone that I recently connected with through a men's group, the Shambhala Brotherhood, established by a mutual friend of ours, Jiro Taylor. He's a creator, activator, entrepreneur, and world traveler, and the founder of refinethemind.com, where he mentors creators to own power, trust nature, and shift to an aligned path. He is infinitely curious about how we can liberate ourselves on every level to live the truth of who we are. So, welcome, Jordan. Welcome to the Hustle and Flow podcast, mate. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie and Shaun.
Pleasure. So, I thought the first thing we could speak about, if you could just fill us in a bit more about your personal journey, Jordan. Tell us about who you are, where you're from. We'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, it's been a wild one. I'll say that. It's been a wild ride so far in this lifetime. I was born in Iowa, small town in Iowa, lived there for the first 18 years of my life in the Midwestern United States. Went to university about 3 hours from where I'm from in Lincoln, Nebraska. And that's where things started to take kind of a dramatic turn. I started to become disillusioned with a lot of the structures and dogmas and ideas and life scripts that had been handed down to me, and began to a kind of radical questioning process. I happened to find, or was guided to, magic mushrooms around that time, which were profoundly catalytic for me, sort of ripped off the blinders and helped me to see that the life script that had been handed down to me was just one model of how life could be, and it was generated by other humans like me, and it wasn't necessarily the best script for me and my soul for nurturing my particular essence. So I began journeying with psychedelics and reading a wide array of authors. I was studying English literature and philosophy at the time, and I was introduced to Friedrich Nietzsche, who became profoundly impactful for me, Emerson, Thoreau, Kerouac, Ginsberg, Foucault, Marx, Freud, the whole gang of rebellious Western thinkers started kind of popping up in my field at university.
Yeah.
Started inspiring me a lot. I started traveling more around the United States, and then I got the idea to study abroad because some friends had done that, and I spent a month in Spain, and that really ripped open the floodgates of my wanderlust, and it made me realize even more so that I couldn't just slot myself into the machine in some kind of, cog-like function within someone else's agenda. I had to find a way to kind of break out of that matrix and do something different. Mm-hmm. And so I learned about teaching English in Asia. I learned there was a big opportunity to do that, applied for some programs, ended up going to South Korea to teach English for a year in 2013, and stayed in Asia for 16 months. And that was really a profound paradigm shift. It was even more so like crossing a threshold, point of no return. There was really no going back to normal reality after that. So since then, it's been a wild ride I've traveled to about 32 or so countries by this point, been kind of wandering the globe for a few years and building businesses online, creating courses and content around spirituality and philosophy and personal transformation, entrepreneurship, alternative lifestyles, self-healing, stuff like that. Have begun doing one-on-one and group coaching and co-creating retreats through High Existence, another company I co-own alongside Refine the Mind. And yeah, a couple years ago, I discovered ayahuasca, and that was a whole other quantum leap for me that just ripped off a number of additional snake skins and catalyzed a rebirth, the likes of which I could have never seen coming. And that just put me even more feeling like just in alignment with the currents of the universe and just surrendering to and trusting the intelligence of all that is, and sort of entering into this process of co-creative allowing where I'm just, watching the signals, watching the synchronicities and seeing where things want to go next and just aligning myself with that at this point. So I'm along for the ride, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, amazing, man. Thanks so much for the share. So many things that I was just busy writing down a few words just so we can touch on them a bit later, mate. But usually the flow of this particular podcast, we talk on one particular topic that will lead us down whatever the rabbit hole seems to take us. So the topic we might start off with, mate, is holding space. So when I speak those words, what comes up for you, mate?
So what immediately comes up is that holding space is one of the absolute most vital, crucial skills a human being can possibly possess. And I find it profoundly fascinating that I never even heard those words until I was probably 25 years old or something like that. We're not taught about holding space. We're not taught how to hold space for whatever arises. So what I think of first is that holding space begins with oneself and then moves outward from there. And if I were to define holding space, I might say that holding space is having an in-touchness with the infinite spaciousness that lies beyond the thinking mind and beyond our immediate experience and all the stories we tell ourselves about life and who we are. Beyond that, there's an infinite spaciousness that has a kind of frequency of imperturbable peace. It's like pure neutral awareness. And the more in touch you are with the space of pure neutral awareness, the more you can drop back from your experience and just kind of melt into this space of pure neutral awareness, the more you have a high capacity to allow and hold space for whatever is arising in your experience. So holding space is kind of like being the space in which our entire experience is arising, in which the mind is arising and the idea of the self, and learning how through meditation and other practices to drop back and be that space, and therefore gain a level of resilience and a level of imperturbability and equanimity and sovereignty that few people have. And once you've begun to master this in your own process, holding space for yourself, then you can begin also holding space for others in a more powerful capacity in your personal relationships, and perhaps as well in a professional capacity, such as in retreats or coaching, etc.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for that, mate. Shaun, any thoughts, mate?
You mentioned, Jordan, that what I picked up from you telling us your story, which is a super interesting one, is that you've been through what it sounds like is a number of transformations at different points in your life. And I guess your awareness in general would have also shifted and changed over those periods. So I'm wondering, during those different times, how those transformations changed you. You mentioned when you'd studied abroad in Spain for a month and then felt that you'd kind of broken out of the matrix, and then you were in Asia for 16 months and that kind of just was no turning back for you. And I guess, is there anything during those experiences that you remember that really made you feel within that change was happening, that you were aware of, and what that space was like at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say for about the last 10 years or so, it's almost been a constant process of transformation, although there have been certain major peaks, I would say. The feeling of transformation while being abroad, when I think of that first and foremost, I think of a radically expanding notion of possibility. I met different people in my travels. I met nomads backpackers who, I was on an island in Cambodia and I just met people who had arrived there 6 months before and just felt like, oh, wow, this is paradise. I love it here. I'm just going to find a way to stay here. And so they had figured out how to work in hostels or bars there, or they had started online businesses, or they'd done whatever. They'd somehow magicianed their way into just living as long as they wanted on a tropical island in paradise. And so once you encounter people like that and you realize that that is possible, it's just, you almost can't go back to a paradigm that says, oh yeah, life has to be really hard. You have to do a lot of stuff you don't want to do. You have to, like, work generally sucks. You just kind of punch the clock and you suffer through it for 50 years so you can retire. Once you see a number of living examples of people who have broken out of that matrix, out of that paradigm, who have escaped the rat race, let's say, you just feel in yourself, it kind of activates you. It activates this expansive sense of possibility. And you realize, oh, these are just humans like me. If they can do this, I can do this too. So yeah, that rapidly, vastly expanded sense of possibility is what comes up first when I think about travel.
Amazing.
Like, what I'm hearing you say is that exposure to different people in different places kind of awoke that awareness within you that there's other possibilities out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Infinite possibilities, really. Yeah.
Cool. And how about you, Les? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I mean, is that what you would say is the catalytic factor? If you could pinpoint one, because of course there's going to be many along the journey, and we all know that there are. But what would you say was the first moment that sort of woke you up to the endless possibilities of what is?
Well, a couple of things come up. As I mentioned, psychedelics were extremely important for me. Magic mushrooms. Psychedelics have the potential to just dissolve all your ingrained meaning-making structures. Your ingrained reality tunnel can just kind of dissolve, and you can have a temporary experience of dramatically expanded consciousness and kind of re-encountering the world anew as if you were once again a child seeing it with fresh eyes for the first time.
Yeah.
So those early psychedelic experiences gave me that, and that was profoundly catalytic. When it comes to travel, I think one of the biggest factors is that a lot of people feel in their souls and their hearts like an evolutionary impulse to transform or to blossom, to break through into a new paradigm. But probably the biggest factor preventing most people from doing that is being surrounded by people and an environment that they've been in for many years, that they've habituated to, and that has a very strong gravity compelling them to continue being the person that they've been. They're afraid of breaking out of that for fear of the judgment that they'll receive from their peers. So your own family and friends, if you've been in the same place for a really long time, they're not consciously doing this, but in a weird unconscious way, they kind of become the agent Smiths who are convincing you to stay in the particular matrix that you've always been in. When you travel, you rip yourself out of that, you strip away everything and everyone you've ever known, and suddenly there's just no longer this huge gravity and these external kind of agents compelling you so deeply to keep being the person that you've been. And that's when this huge space opens up where a lot of snakeskins can fall away, because suddenly you don't have this external pressure and expectation compelling you to continue being that person. You start to feel like, oh, I'm just out here. I don't know any of these people. What do I have to lose? And it's almost like just that space allows your heart and soul to blossom forth in a more authentic way and melt away the less authentic levels of persona and roles and identities that you had kind of been acculturated into in your initial reality matrix of your local cultural matrix, wherever you happen to be born or wherever you lived for a long ass time. So, yeah.
Beautiful, man. I resonate with so much with what you just said, and I love that you're using the matrix as an analogy, because it's something that I've deeply connected with, that particular movie and all the concepts within it. I'm just going to riff on a little bit, touching on a few things that you spoke of. I'm not sure if there's going to be any structural flow to this, but it doesn't matter. We'll take it where it leaves us.
Beautiful.
But in terms of holding space, for me, it comes down to very simple presence, and in everything that word embodies, because presence infers purity. It infers right here, right now. It infers a lack of corruption and outside influence. It just is. And when we hold space and we are utterly present in the moment, this is also something that is a mirror for everyone else that we encounter in the near or in the far, within our little range, within the space that we create. So presence for me is a nice way or the way that I like to encapsulate that. And in terms of a broad and cultural shift, I completely, resonate with what you said in what that shows you, because you told the story of my life in terms of, lacking the courage to break out of these conceptions, these environmental conceptions that I was, ingrained into. I lacked the courage to do that until I was hit with a particular catalytic moment in my life when I was diagnosed with cancer. And then that's the thing that shook me out. Like you said, we always know and we always want to grow and transform, but there are things that will keep us there until certain moments in time. So that was my catalyst, and that led me down a road. And in terms of talking about shifting of cultures and experiencing the world, how I can talk to that and relate to that is my experience when I lived in Japan for a few weeks and stayed in a Zen Buddhist monastery. And that I remember a moment where the conception of time and space just fell away, and I was really, this was a shift in physical space, but it gave me infinite space to discover and everything to fall away. And I distinctly remember that I was just looking out into the ocean on a drive back from a grocery run with the Buddhist monk, and we were just driving along the shoreline, and like I said, the conception of time just fell away, and everything else fell away. Everything back home fell away. Only a handful of people that I hold dear in my heart were real, but everything else back home was just, it didn't matter. So that's the power of space, right? But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit more and sort of relate to what you mentioned. But also, I'd love to talk more and dig deeper into your psychedelic journeys. And maybe we can exchange stories as well, because I too have worked with grandmother Aya and grandfather Wachuma as well. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, man, where to begin? So, yeah, ayahuasca in the last couple of years has been profoundly important and transformational for me. It's hard to know where to begin. It's kind of like having your your soul blasted clean with a pressure washer or something like this, or with like a mystical fire hose. It's just like blasting. Like if you think of, if you know the metaphor of Aldous Huxley's reducing valve, he had this idea of like that our normal day-to-day consciousness is kind of like, there's almost like a reducing valve that takes consciousness at large and just distills it down into this kind of drip, 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 so that we can function in day-to-day life. Because if we were constantly having this kind of oceanic experience of consciousness, we couldn't really function pragmatically in the world. Psychedelics, and especially ayahuasca, are like temporarily widening that reducing valve and just letting in this massive influx of consciousness. It's like drinking a cup of consciousness. And what it does is, I mean, it's like Muji said, step into the fire of self-discovery. This fire will not burn you. It will only burn what you're not. So it's really ayahuasca is the fire of self-discovery. It is holding up the sacred mirror, seeing yourself clearly in your fullness of humanity, all the darkness and all the light, the full spectrum, seeing what you've become, what you've been doing, how you've been lying to yourself, how you haven't been being as purely honest in your expression of being as you could be, how you have been playing small in subtle ways, and how you've blocked yourself from a lot of your true power out of fear of your own power, how you've given your power away by subtly telling yourself stories about being a victim rather than owning your true power as the sovereign king or queen of your reality, as the sovereign creator of your reality. Ayahuasca has just helped me release a tremendous amount of inner smallness, neurosis, guilt, self-judgment, anxiety, self-loathing. Now it's like, sometimes energies like these can still come through my system, but ayahuasca helped me to stop firmly dichotomizing experience into these categories of good and bad. And instead now I have so much more space for whatever energetic texture is moving through my system, because I don't have such an impulse to label it. This is good and this is bad. Oh, I don't want to feel that. I'm going to push that away. Oh, I'm going to try to hold on to this. Rather, it's more like hands off. I am just the space, the neutral space in which all of this stuff is happening. And maybe the most profound thing about working with ayahuasca has been reconnecting. Like, I had considered myself a deeply spiritual person prior to ayahuasca, but with ayahuasca, I've had a number of experiences that felt like just coming face to face with divinity itself, face to face with God, and realizing that my true nature and all of our true nature is not separate from God, from the divine power that bursts all things, and that this infinite intelligence and power and love of the Creator is so infinitely vast and just so beyond the conception of the monkey mind, that just melting into that frequency of the Creator has been the most beautiful experience of my life, and has given me such a deep sense of trust in the wisdom and intelligence of nature and of divinity. It's just allowed me to go so much deeper into trust, which really I've come to see as almost like the key to life is trust, or surrender, or non-resistance, just surrendering to the divine flow of all that is. And also given me a sense of having a direct personal connection and relationship with God, with a higher power. That has been the greatest gift of my human existence.
Yeah, amazing, man. Amazing. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Shaun, I'd love to hear from you, man, because as someone who knows of psychedelics and has heard much about them, but hasn't personally used them, but also has a very deep spiritual connection and practice, I'd love to get your thoughts, man.
Um, there's things that you explained, Jordan, that I've experienced myself, having never used psychedelics. And so I know that people that have used psychedelics have these profound experiences, and it opens up essentially this gateway to this vast realm and these infinite possibilities. And I'm just wondering, now for people that are like me, I don't have any aversion to psychedelics or drugs or anything like that. Everyone just makes their own personal choices, right? I've had a deep faith for a long time, and I choose to stay in tune with my faith, you know, just as I choose to with the practices that I have. I pray. I just, frankly, I just talk to God all the time, and I feel that connection. And people, you know, could say, maybe you're just making that up in your mind, but I think when you know things, right? Like you can feel it, and you've got to trust that intuition and just those feelings you have in your soul, right? But what I am interested, when I do hear about people's experiences that they've had with psychedelics, it's that this unlocking or this opening that you know, that it happens, and it's a very real thing, you know, because when you've explained your story just now, or a few of your experiences, the conviction that you speak with, I can feel it. I know that you've experienced those things, and I'm curious to know whether you think you would have had such an awakening or experiences like that had you not delved into psychedelics. Do you think there's another way for people to access the vastness, or I'd be really interested to know what you think about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, there are many paths to the top of the mountain, and all tributaries lead to the ocean. I think we're literally all heading back to the same place, which is a remembrance of our true nature and what we truly are, which is the divine nature of all that is. I think, I mean, it's something like 40% of Americans report having had a mystical experience at this point. Mystical experiences are more common than people realize, and moments of, I think, deep spiritual insight or moments of awakening or satori are also more common than people realize. You know, a lot of the classic modalities, meditation, fasting, ecstatic dance, breath work, yoga, whirling dervish practices. You know, there's a sacred sexuality. There's like a whole smorgasbord of practices and psychotechnologies that have emerged throughout global history that are all portals to the same place, really. So I can't really say what would have happened to me if I hadn't found psychedelics, because it feels to me like it was sort of fated in my particular case, or it just feels like it couldn't have really happened any other way in this lifetime. Like the plants were going to find me one way or another. But yeah, like I said, I think all rivers lead to the ocean. We're all heading to the same place. If only upon death, I think all of us on the planet right now are going to go through that portal and experience that vastness sooner or later. So.
And the reason I ask that is because I guess a big part of why Les and I choose to do this show is that we hope that people take away nuggets and things that they find useful that they can use in their own lives to move forward and to explore things. And I know that some people, you know, don't want to delve down that path for whatever reason. But also, I'm not naive to the fact that humans have this fear of missing out, right? And I feel that with psychedelics in particular, people hear about these experiences and like, shit, I really want to feel that if you haven't experienced something like it, right? And that I know that there's, for sure, for lack of a better word, a process to these things. Like you don't just delve in and, you know, grab a bag of mushrooms and sit in a room by yourself. Or try and find some guy in a random apartment that says he has ayahuasca and sit down with him. So maybe if you could talk to your particular experience, if you're comfortable to share that, and how that actually helped you to have this awakening in a space that was essentially safe and that allowed you to have these experiences. And maybe Les, you could explain that to after Jordan, because I think that's an important part of it, because I've heard about Les's experience, and from other people that I've spoken to about it, that holding that space to have that experience is a really important element.
Yeah, it's fundamentally important. I'm really glad that you bring this point up, because some people say, like, if meditation is a rake, psychedelics are like a leaf blower, or something like this. It's like if meditation is like a match, psychedelics are like an inferno. It's really not something to take lightly, not something to mess around with. You really need to approach psychedelics with reverence, with a lot of reverence, with a sense of approaching very sacred plant teachers, and to have a sense of humbling yourself. And I certainly, in my early explorations with psychedelics, I didn't do that. I didn't know what I was getting into. And this is very often the case, is just, college students or whoever else who, their buddy says, hey, I got this bag of mushrooms. They're supposed to make you have a crazy experience. You want to eat some? Sure. And that's how the plants found me, and it worked out fine. But for most people, or in general, it's wiser to take an approach of doing more research, having some sense of what you're getting into, finding an experienced guide or center or retreat to work with. Synthesis Retreat in the Netherlands does psilocybin retreats. Our Apotheosis Retreat through High Existence, we do retreats with psilocybin and with ayahuasca. Soltara, Rhythmia, Ocean Forest, Eco Lodge. These are some great ayahuasca centers in Costa Rica that I've worked with. So there's really an emerging plethora of really fantastic options to work with these spiritual psychotechnologies in a wisely held and wisely cultivated container. So that would definitely be, my recommendation for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely echo your sentiments there about the container and the sanctity of the space that is held in order for the work to do what it needs to do to every individual that sits with the plant. That I was personally very fortunate to find the right group to hold an immensely beautiful space for me to allow the euphoric discovery through the plant itself that needed to happen through my own personal experience. So yes, like I said, echoing that sentiment about the importance of the space that is held during these types of ceremonies, and it must be respected and honored. But it is also the part of yourself and the preparedness or readiness of the individual who is sitting. Like you said, it's not about just jumping in and hoping for a cure for whatever ails you, but it's almost, like you said, it's almost an intuitive calling, and you have to be prepared for that and in the right state of mind to accept whatever comes through. And that to me is very important. I think a lot of people, they use the saying, the importance of set and setting, and that's what we're talking about here, right? Your mindset, and then the space that the setting that you practice within. And I want to talk more about, again, going back to how we look at these forms of finding space. Finding space is my platform, and it's big. And I want to talk about, again, echoing the point that Shaun was making about people choosing their own path that leads to the same ocean, right? these are just tools, and there are a plethora of tools, as you said, Jordan. There's tools everywhere, and they suit different needs for different people at different points in time, at different points in their lives. Meditation has been a pivotal tool in my own life, and I've used that for several years to come to certain understandings and experiences similar to that of my plant medicine journeys, right? But like you said, I think the foundational principle of each of these tools is that we're all just trying to find, at the end of the day, and this ties back into our topic beautifully, is that it's just tools for creation of space for yourself, right? And that's all they are. However you want to describe it. And I think the beautiful analogy of a cup of muddy water being stirred and stirred and stirred and stirred. And at what ferocity that is, that depends on the noise that surrounds you, your physical environment, your mental environment, your spiritual environment. But all these modes of, creating more space is simply to allow that cup of muddy water to settle and create a level of clarity for you. And like you said, some might, create a sense of clarity much, much quicker, or blast you there for a momentary period. But I reflect back to, my stay at the Zen Buddhist monastery and the discipline that these monks show to a lifelong practice of creating space for themselves, simply through meditation and living in flow, So there's so many ways to approach it. But yeah, beautiful to hear your story and your take on it. Thanks for sharing with that, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. It comes up to say that I think in his book, Courage, Osho says that God is space. God is space. And of course, God is that which is beyond all names, but just thinking of pure space is a good pointer, I think, toward God, toward the divine.
Absolutely. And I think it's a good sort of point to make in terms of, and I want to come back to something you said earlier about the journey and the process and the constancy of that. And I think that is key in our discussion in terms of our venture towards discovering or finding space. We're always trying to find more of it. I think that the key is that we're never really going to reach that end point of infinite spaciousness, but that isn't the point at all. And we talked about this a little bit, pre-jumping on off camera here, mate, about not locking into labels or locking into certain futures. And I think that encompasses it nicely there in terms of highlighting the infiniteness and the sheer possibility of what could be in continual discovery of space.
Yeah, it's kind of a paradox because infinite spaciousness is our ever-present reality. It's like that Zen or non-dual saying, consciousness is already enlightened. Literally, reality is already liberated. It's already awake. We just typically aren't seeing it. So it's like we're already home. We're already here. We've already discovered infinite spaciousness. And yet we're kind of playing a game of hide and seek with ourselves where we go through this kind of labyrinth of forgetting and remembering and forgetting and remembering and hiding from ourselves. But yeah, eventually it recurringly, without fail, leads back to the rediscovery and remembrance of what we've always been and what already always is the case. So yeah,
it's like that analogy you can use about a dog chasing its tail, right? The dog is chasing its tail, trying to find out what it's chasing, who it is, but then it just stops and is like, oh, I'm a dog.
Yeah, it reminds me of Alan Watts' quip, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth.
Exactly.
Similar.
Exactly. Yeah.
One other point that I wanted to make that seems important in modern times is that all of these modalities, as you say, they're all tools for finding space, and different people are going to be attracted to different ones at different times, and it's all perfect. I do think that there's a reason we're seeing a dramatic resurgence of interest in psychedelics and kind of a viral underground spread of psychedelics right now. And it's because in Western culture, in the last few hundred years especially, we've become sort of pathologically fixated on the thinking mind. We've put the monkey mind, the conscious, linear, rational mind on a pedestal, and we worship this as the pinnacle of intelligence in the universe. This is kind of the most popular ideology. It's kind of like a global monoculture at this point, is this kind of mental worship. And most people don't even realize that they're completely addicted to thought, and they're completely identified with the thoughts running in their head and the story they're telling themselves 24 hours a day. And it's actually really, when you're in a culture like this that's so pathologically thoughtful and so fixated on the rational monkey mind, it's very, very hard to find that initial like space between the thoughts to kind of like puncture the hole in the matrix and see the light and start to move beyond thought into that trans-rational space of pure awareness. Meditation can get you there, but for a moderner who is addicted to thinking, you know, I'm afraid a lot of people spend years in meditation and they don't make much progress, and they don't really puncture the matrix and kind of move beyond thought, because thought has become so neurotically incessant. And so as a result of that, I think, and as a result of the fact that we're now arguably at a point in our planet's history where we need as a species to transcend this pathological worship of the thinking mind, and we need to reconnect with the deeper wisdom that resides in the realms beyond the thinking mind, the realms of pure consciousness and the body and the heart and the intuition. We're at a point where we need some of these more powerful tools that are able to rapidly, just if only temporarily, dissolve the thought structure, dissolve the thought paradigm, so that people can get a taste of what is meant by terms like pure awareness and terms like pure space and divinity. Because once you get that first taste of freedom, it's like you're activated. You're going to spend the rest of your life widening that hole and increasing that space, because once you get a taste of it, it's freedom, it's liberation. And so that's why, interestingly, that's why Osho innovated all of his active meditations. He innovated a whole slew of movement meditations, because he too perceived that sitting meditation just wasn't really cutting the mustard for moderners in a lot of cases. And I think that, to return to Shaun's point about this fear of missing out, for people thinking, oh, those psychedelics sound really powerful. If people aren't drawn to psychedelics, there are other ways to have those experiences, and there are other ways to cut through the noise of the mind more rapidly. I think sitting meditation is not necessarily the best one. I would really look into Osho's active meditations. I would look into ecstatic dance. I would really look into breath work. I've had some experiences with breath work that were profoundly psychedelic in nature. Breath work really has the capacity to open up that same transpersonal kind of, I don't know, feeling like the veils are becoming thinner between you and the spirit world, and moving beyond the thinking mind. So just wanted to add that note in there.
Yeah, totally.
Really helpful. That's really helpful for people, I think, Jordan.
Yeah. And I think, to come back to your point, I think partly that as well would likely be down to the fact that, again, when we're talking about modern culture, there's a certain pace that we operate within, whether it's physically, mentally, right? And there's a pace of our actions, the pace of how thoughts and our minds run on a constant basis, it asks us, or it necessitates us to have those urges of, instantaneous, relief from what is. And I guess that's part of the reason why those modalities or those tools are more appealing today to the modern people. Because a big thing for myself, and I experience this again in the monastery, is simply about dissolving the conception of time and having to sit with what is. And there's a real beauty in that. There's a real depth in just being slow. And I personally, it's something that is so enriching in my life, in my personal life. The being without the need to sprint all the time. It's amazing to just step off that and just be and just sit and see what comes, see what falls, see what dissolves. So yeah, I think, again, it just depends, but I totally agree with you in terms of the current modern environment and what we're sort of drawn towards and why that is. And it's just about that abundance of accessibility that we have now and the instantaneous accessibility. So yeah, totally.
Yeah, a couple of things that come up there. For one, I want to give a shout out to the website slow.co, sloww.co by Kyle Kowalski. He's a friend of mine, and he just has been curating an incredible resource all about how to slow down in life and the art of letting go of this pathological busyness that our culture has. I think the reasons for this pathological busyness, on one hand, yes, it's the convenience and the accessibility. It's also that we're being systematically acculturated and conditioned to feel that we are not fundamentally enough and that we need to jump through a bunch of hoops and buy a whole bunch of shit to complete ourselves.
Totally.
This is like literally the subtext of so much of the media signals that are hitting our brainstem from a super young age. And so we're literally being drawn into this matrix of running this hamster wheel and running this rat race for our entire lives, just to and slotting into someone else's agenda because we've been given this fundamental kind of wound that is partially culturally inherited and partially just like a common human wound, I think, in modern times, of just having this deep sense of being a small, separate, incomplete being who needs to go prove himself and gain a bunch of stuff in order to somehow become complete, even though nothing external ever ends up giving you that feeling of completeness. So you just run the rat race your entire life until you die, unless you discover your already fundamental wholeness that is always there, which is the same as discovering space, which is the same as discovering God. That's the thing that really heals that fundamental wound. And so when it comes to snapping out of that pathological busyness, one thing that I sometimes tell people is to just make a practice out of doing absolutely nothing for a while. Don't even try to meditate. Just literally, just let yourself be, just do nothing at all. Because by doing nothing, you'll go dramatically against your deep conditioned programming that is telling you to constantly be doing something and constantly check things off the to-do list because you're trying to fill this void. So just by doing nothing, you'll disrupt, it'll be a deep pattern disrupt, and you'll kind of open up a space to really look at those fundamental feelings and that fundamental programming that is driving your behavior. And if you open up enough space, you can then begin to reconnect with your authentic intrinsic motivation and your authentic evolutionary impulse that is wanting to take certain actions that are actually aligned with your soul. And you can then shift into a totally different paradigm rather than jumping the hoops and running the rat race to try to please mommy and daddy and please society and do what the advertisers are telling you to do. you start taking a totally different type of action, which is an aligned action that is emanating from intrinsic motivation coming from your soul. And that's when you really start to come alive. You start to radiate a different type of energy. You start to really feel like you're coming into your own and you're aligning with the flow of things and with all that is. And then it becomes, that's also kind of a fast track to discovering space and discovering God, I think, because when you are truly following your bliss and following your highest excitement and doing what makes you come alive, synchronicities just start to happen like this. You start to magnetize the people and situations that you're really looking for, and a deeper intelligence in all that is starts to make itself apparent to you. So
totally, man. Yeah. Shaun, did you have anything to add on that one, man?
No, I would also echo that taking some time to just do nothing is important. I guess, like, for the purpose of this show, I'm the hustle, right? And I'm very much into trying to fit as much as I can into a day, doing things at a faster pace. But like you said earlier, not everything is dichotomous. And I think people have this notion that and I believe that, how you do one thing is how you do all things, but not from a literal point of view, right? I was thinking about that this morning. So I walk every day, and that's kind of like my meditation. I realized that's my anchor, but and that's why I'm definitely going to be looking into Osho, which you suggested, and the moving meditation, because that sounds more up my alley. I find it very hard to sit down, just be still, and to not think. And I'd also, it was explained recently, I'd heard that, what you said about complexity being put on this pedestal, right? And it's like how that people see that as intelligence, that you can grasp complex notions. More complex something is, the harder it is. So the smarter you are if you're able to grasp that. Whereas genius is actually finding the simplicity through the complexity, right? And I think that actually taking time to do nothing allows you to find or have those genius moments for yourself. That's what I've noticed, right? And just because you're someone that thinks you need to be going all the time, like I do, you also need to be mindful that in order to be able to do that, if you are that type of person, you need to take some time to actually just give yourself the space and the time to just be with yourself and not be bombarded by everything external, right? And then you can kind of calibrate where you actually want to go. So I definitely want to put that out for people that feel like, like slowing down is not for me. I've got to go hard all the time because how I do one thing is how I do all things. That's not the case for everything. It's more of a figure of speech, right? It's like if you're someone who's dedicated, you're a dedicated person. Or if you're someone that, is diligent, you try to be diligent in all the things you do. But it doesn't mean that just because you're fast, you have to be fast at everything. Or because you're slow, you have to be slow at everything, right? I think it's really important for people to take on what you said about just doing nothing, taking the time and creating that space. I think it's really important.
Totally, man. And I think, like, firstly, echo your point, Jordan, about slow.co, a page that I follow personally, and I find, again, a lot of resonance and alignment with, the content that they share. So really love what they do. But I think that, both your guys' points about the nature of modern society these days, it's really a nice example right now. Right now, we're recording in mid-April, so in the height of lockdown across the globe, and you'll see a lot of the conversation and dialogue is around people's inability to be at home and feeling like they're imprisoned. And it's a really difficult time for a lot of people to stay home and watch Netflix and be comfortable, people's inability to sit with silence and just be. So it really is a nice look or view at what you mentioned about how society is and our what appeals to us and what we need to be continuously stimulated by some sort of external factor. And that's just how we've been conditioned. But yeah, I mean, I want to come back to a separate point here, just about, and this will talk to, you know, this period that we're going through and what people are yearning for, and something that you mentioned about before is just this conception of normal and normalcy, you know. Talk to us a little bit about that, mate, in whatever context you want to take it. But I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought up the whole COVID-19 shakeup.
I did read your essay, by the way. Yes.
Nice.
So please plug it if you like.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I was almost like a man possessed for about 10 days writing this 12,000 word essay called Coronavirus, Enlightenment, and the Planetary Transition. You can find that at refinethemind.com/coronavirus if you would like to. But yeah, what we're seeing right now is, you know, there's countless narratives about what it is, but I think we can all agree that it's a massive disruption of normalcy, a massive disruption of business as usual. And in that regard, my sense is that this is, I mean, through the lens of kind of the primary mythology through which I'm understanding this moment of human history, which is basically that our current trajectory of normalcy is kind of heading toward falling off a cliff. It's not sustainable. And so we need some kind of large scale course correction. Within that frame, I see this as a really positive thing to kind of press this giant pause button on civilization that's just giving everyone a chance to reflect on what is normalcy? What have I actually been doing all these years? Is this what I really want to be doing? Is this what we should be doing collectively? I loved Jiro, our mutual friend Jiro Taylor's post yesterday, I think on Facebook, where he says something like, the real conspiracy is that you have more free time and feel freer now than you usually do. Because a lot of people are, you know, feeling like, oh, when can we get back to normal life? Well, it's like, are you sure you want to go back to normal life? Because that's where you're literally constantly complaining about being forced to go to a job that you don't like and jump through all these hoops all the time.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Aren't you more free now? So yeah, I mean, it's very hard to say, you know, where this shakeup will lead. We're all kind of along for the ride, and we'll see at this point. My sense is that this can help contribute to the course correction that we need. I don't think that this catastrophe or this event is likely seismic enough in proportion to kind of send out the sort of shockwave that would really be needed to generate like really deep systems level change, or like I don't know, a critical mass of kind of a mass awakening and the realization of needing to reroute civilization. I think this is probably the first in a series of kind of milestone liminal events that we're likely to see in the next couple hundred years that are, and there are likely to be some that are substantially more of a roundhouse kick in the face to our species than this one, that will gradually jolt us out of our slumber and help us to realize, oh, we are not nearly as resilient, regenerative, anti-fragile, sovereign, wise as we need to be as a species in order to navigate the waters ahead in this strange time where we have the technology of gods and we've got the power of gods. We need to embody the wisdom and care and love and sovereignty of gods to be able to wield that power, to borrow a metaphor from Daniel Schmachtenberger, who likes to speak of it in those terms. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I locate this event in an ongoing liminal process. I think we've been living in a time of great transition for many decades now. But most people have had the blinders on and have kind of ignored that. There's this crazy field of normalcy that has the ability to just absorb. I mean, it's insane in my lifetime, the changes that have happened alone simply in terms of technology and how we're all living day to day, the rise of computers and everyone having a supercomputer in their hand. And yet most of us just take this for granted, and we're just like, oh yeah, I just have this magic portal where I can access humanity's entire library of wisdom and talk to anyone on the other side of the planet in a moment. It's like, this stuff has massive implications for what our species is and where it's going. And this event is one in a series that will progressively awaken us more and more to the true nature of where we're at, and the course correction that we're being summoned to undergo, the kind of phase shift or level up.
Totally. Completely agree with you, man. And it's a great piece of writing. I encourage listeners to go and have a read. So I'll drop the link in the show notes if anyone wants to read. But to close, I think I want to just talk a little bit about, and we're just coming back to something that I just remembered and just recalled, is this shifting, or this movement on this spectrum of fast and slow, or speed and and rest, however you want to label it. And I'll talk to that. I want to talk to that in the context of entrepreneurship, because when I heard Shaun talk about it, the modern narrative is all about, this hustle mindset, this 10x, all that sort of stuff. You just got to go to be an entrepreneur, to be successful, to reach the pinnacle of what we perceive as the ultimate being, ultimate goal of human existence, right? But talk to us about this balance, and I want you to weigh in as well, Shaun, because I know that you'll have a good view on this as well.
Love for you to go first, Jordan.
Thank you, sir. So there's a book called Power versus Force by David Hawkins. Power versus Force is an amazing book. And to put it succinctly, he describes the difference between a force paradigm of consciousness and a power paradigm of consciousness. He devised a logarithmic scale of consciousness in his lifetime that has different levels, which indicate a person's kind of predominant paradigm of consciousness. And below level 200 on his scale is a force paradigm, and above level 200 is a power paradigm. And most of humanity is in a force paradigm. And I think the force paradigm is really prevalent in the world of entrepreneurship. And a force paradigm is when you're not really connected to your true power and not really trusting life. You're more identified with your ego. And so you're trying to control life, actually. You feel fundamentally kind of insecure. And so you're trying to throw yourself against life to move it into the shape that you want. You're trying to control it. You feel a constant need to kind of be doing maintenance and trying to be getting X and Y done to push life into the shape you want it, which ultimately is not very efficient and tends to waste massive amounts of energy and not be that effective. A power paradigm is more akin to Lao Tzu's or the Taoist notion of non-action, which is more like better translated as effortless action, where you focus more on internal liberation and internal embodiment and purification and kind of becoming a more aligned and powerful embodiment of your true nature. And then from that simple fact of what you are being, what you have embodied, what you have become, that becomes like an attractor that will magnetize the people and situations that you're looking for, and will cause you to kind of come alive and radiate and emanate a different type of energy that causes you to be like an activating or healing or liberating presence wherever you go, simply by virtue of being what you are, simply by virtue of being in this energy field and emanating this energy. And so this realization that doing the specific actions we're doing are actually downstream of being, that being is most fundamental. Whatever your fundamental energy is going to permeate any actions you try to take in the world. And so you cannot do or build anything that will not have the same kind of energetic signature as your fundamental energy that you were embodying when you took those actions and when you did that thing. And so no amount of action can create no amount of action from a lower paradigm of consciousness can create the results that a higher paradigm of consciousness creates, simply by virtue of being what it is and being this kind of, having this almost planetary gravity of like drawing and magnetizing the things resonating on its same frequency to it, and also just emanating that frequency out to activate and heal and liberate those who are in its presence and who are ready for that level of activation, transformation, awakening. So when I think of entrepreneurship, again, I see a culture of kind of hustle, grind, kind of burn yourself out, burning the candle at both ends culture to make it as an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. But I also see an emerging new paradigm, a kind of new school paradigm of marketing and sales and entrepreneurship that is exemplified well by entrepreneurs like Dane Thomas and Juliet Tang and Jiro Taylor, these kind of new school entrepreneurs who have done extremely deep spiritual work, and so are embodying a frequency of truth. They're like being their truth on such a high aligned level that they don't need to be checking off massive to-do lists and hustling and grinding to do every little thing. Simply by being what they are and taking relatively small amounts of time to write posts and do a Facebook Live, or just continually show up and broadcast their message, they are easily magnetizing the soulmate clients that they're meant to work with, the audience and clients they're meant to work with. They're, near as I can tell, relatively easily filling their coaching slots and their programs and their retreats, and they're having an enormous impact on the people that they're helping as a result of simply having embodied a higher level of their own soul and truth. And so that's an example of entrepreneurs who are more in a power paradigm. So that's the essence of how I think about that divide. Yeah.
I think you put it so well and so eloquently the way you've explained it. So I've never read that book, but what you've explained kind of talks about my personal transformation of how I think, because I've spent a number of years just trying to force. And to be honest, it works for certain things, but where you end up is vastly different to where you end up when you just, you are who you are and you decide. Well, for me, I think you are who you decide to be, right? But the being is the key. You have to be who you are and then operate out of that. And when you do that, the way in which you do things then has a much different result to doing what you think you should do, because that's what you've been told to do, or you've seen someone else who you think is successful as an entrepreneur do that, and you're like, shit, if I do that, then I'll be successful, or I'll have the same result. And it's rarely the case, right? Yes, you can model success, but you have to model success that is in alignment with who you are and who you want to be. Because if you're out of alignment, where you end up is essentially going to make you unhappy, or you're not going to get the result that you want. And I think what you highlighted is so true, man. And if entrepreneurs can start with who they want to be and be that person, and they're able to attract and be on a frequency where they're actually able to attract that which they actually desire, right? And that's what success is to me. It's the fulfillment of your true desires. But you can only actually have your true desires fulfilled if you are honest about who you are and who you want to be, and act out of that. And that's when you truly start to experience your own type of success.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's very important that people do realize that being in a place of power, as opposed to trying to force, is a distinction that is really important to make.
Yeah, and I think to close, I think what I take from this is that there's a beautiful harmony in everything in life, and this is no different, right? There's a beautiful harmony. Like if you look at extremes in any context, and we'll look at it within this one, an extreme with too much force and far too much hustle and grind, what happens? You burn out, you physically deteriorate, you mentally deteriorate, you spiritually deteriorate. You just aren't able to cope working in this extreme mode for far too long. But on the other side, if you're just sitting all the time and not actually acting, well, you may not be bringing what you may want or need to bring to the world, if that is something that is innately within you, right? I'm not saying that it's either good or bad that you do or don't bring something to the world, that you must be an entrepreneur. All I'm saying is that if you have desires to, if you have innate wisdom that is driving and wanting to manifest into the physical realm, if you're not doing anything about it, then it really doesn't make too much sense for you to simply sit and gain all this clarity, right? So yeah, I think we might leave it there. We had a really good conversation. Jordan, why don't you tell the audience about where they can find you, and if you want to plug anything, mate.
Beautiful. Thanks, brother. Yeah. One final thing to add on that last point is just to clarify, I wanted to say, in this power paradigm of effortless action, you may still find yourself taking massive action, but it won't feel like hard, strenuous work if it's flowing from that aligned place of flowing from your soul and doing what truly makes you come alive. You'll melt into that activity, and it will become like a flow state.
Totally.
So
thank you for adding that, man. I think that's so important.
Yeah. I love taking massive aligned action. It's one of my favorite things. So yeah.
Likewise, mate. Likewise.
People can find me at refinedthemind.com, or on Instagram and Twitter at _Jordan_Bates. Facebook, you can Google me, you can search me and find me. YouTube, pretty much wherever you hang out on the internet. So
cool. Thank you, mate. And Shaun?
Best place to find me is on Instagram. So my handle is Shaun Coop, Shaun_Coop, SHAUN_COOP. Just hit me up there, send me a message, and we can interact there. And how about you, Les?
Yeah, so find me on findingspace.co. And also my social media handles is exactly the same, findingspace.co. So that's on Facebook and Insta. So shoot me a line in any of those platforms and say good day.
Cool. And just want to take a moment again to just really appreciate you being on, Jordan. Thank you for joining us today. And for those of you listening, I'm sure that you've taken some great advice today that you can use in your own lives, or also share with some other people. And the way that we grow this podcast is by asking that if you found this useful, to just share it with one other person, someone that you think could really benefit from it. If there's a nugget in here, and just share that out. We're now on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. So just you can share it on any of those platforms. Find us there, leave us a review, and really appreciate you taking the time to listen, guys. So thank you very much.
All right. See you guys. Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, thank you guys.